So welcome back. We have just performed an installation of Metasploit on Linux and then on Windows. And as you will have noticed, the installation is a little bit different. Windows was very simple, the executable install and everything is contained, whereas Linux is very much command line. But the overall effect is exactly the same. So let's move on and let's understand some of the key terminologies that we need to know that will sustain us and help us through the rest of this course. The first one is exploit. An exploit is the mechanism used to attack a system in a particular way that it was never intended to do. And this is key. If you think of the name Metasploit, it's kind of reminiscent of the word exploit. The idea here is an exploit is something in the operating system or the device, something that we can do that will make it vulnerable or do something it shouldn't do. So for example, in Windows, you can do a memory buffer overflow, which means that as we push something into it, it corrupts the memory, and then we can replace that with other things that we want it to do, some malicious code. So understanding what an exploit is, because when we run the commands in Metasploit, the first thing we will do is choose an exploit that we're going to throw at the target machine to try and break into. The second thing is a payload. A payload is a code that is delivered and executed using a framework on a target machine or device. This is the actual thing that we want to send to the other side. Is it some kind of virus perhaps? Is it just something that's going to exploit a specific application and then do something for us? But the payload is the compiled code elements that will be ran on that target machine. Then modules. Modules are very important to Metasploit. They're kind of part of the core framework. Modules within Metasploit are software components that perform chosen attacks on specified targets. So when we run the commands, we'll choose modules of things to run, and then when it hits the target machine, it breaks using the exploit, passes on the payload, and then the modules are the components that run. And then last but not least, a listener. A listener within Metasploit waits for incoming connections from targets that have been exploited. So the idea here is that you find the exploit, break the machine, you pass it your custom payload or code. The code then runs on the target machine and then connects back to your machine potentially, like a command and control type idea, and then sends information over specific ports, and your machine will pick up those and then be able to have a connection between those two targets. So, now that we've understood the basic terminology, those four, exploit, payload, modules, and listener, now we can go ahead and run some basic Metasploit commands inside to see how the syntax should work.